What's up, world? It's Friday, November 17th, 2017. I've got this article here from yournewswire.com. The title is Government Caught Spraying Synthetic DNA to Mutate Humans. This article is from today. I'm not going to read it. It's a little lengthy. It's pretty interesting. There are two videos. They're both just over an hour long. Actually, one's just over an hour long. The other one's about an hour and a half. I'm going to leave a link for this article in this video, and I'm just going to go ahead and set these two videos up, and we're going to play them back to back. So let's take a look.
She's an expert in chemtrails, weather control, synthetic biology. She's the preeminent researcher in this of what's happening in your skies that affect you on a biological or synthetic level. This is very cutting edge stuff. The dark agenda of synthetic biology. Please, I won't waste any more time. Welcome the very wonderful Sophia Smallstorm.
Thank you. This actually is an hour or so, this presentation. We might not have time for questions, but you can ask me at the banquet, or you can come to my table tomorrow and ask me as many questions as you like, which I probably won't be able to answer. So the thing about what's going on now is, how big is the big picture? And I used to think that if you went outside the box, you could see more. And a lot of people believe that this settles at the level of power and control. That if they have all the power, they have all the control, that's what they want. There's actually something beyond that, and that's what I've started to explore. The big picture. I may be wrong, but I want you to follow the dots that I connect, which are basically in the form of a square. I'll start here, I'll go here, I'll go here, I'll go there, and a shape will be made. The terrain is huge. It's much, much bigger than I ever dreamed of. And so it's about really impressions and perspective. And I had a friend who's now no longer alive, Harriet. Harriet used to keep me awake at night on the phone and tell me things until 1 o'clock in the morning, notes that she had taken from listening to radio shows. She really taught me how to see. So, the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Now here is a photograph, and here is an impression. So I am going to give you the impressions that I have gathered and see what you think of them by the end of this evening. We're getting new impressions of the sky. Once upon a time, clouds used to be puffy like this. Today, you see a lot of streaks, feathers, and unnatural crisscross configurations. When you look closely at what forms your impression, you can see that this is the impression version. You will see streaks, feathers, more feathers, lines. When you look closely at the lines, you see this. Looking at a collage of lines, with what appears to be a plane. You see ropes in the sky made by planes. Forming a web, a haze. The formation of man-made clouds is admitted to by NASA. They call it jet cirrus. We're told that new atmospheric conditions are causing jet contrails to linger in the sky. But anything that stays in the sky for many hours fans out, as you see here, and forms a layer of material thick enough to block sunlight for miles, is not condensation. The con in contrail is for condensation. So if it isn't condensation, meaning water droplets that under normal circumstances quickly evaporate, then what is it? Here's the result of one. It was a huge donut. This is Cardiff State Beach, where I live, and it literally formed a big oval, a halo in the sky. Contrails typically form behind high-flying jets, so that's high altitude, in low humidity. Clouds typically form at low altitude in higher humidity. So the rule is this: clouds and contrails need opposite conditions to form. But today, we have vapor trails, as they call them, condensation trails turning into clouds and spreading out to form a low-altitude white haze. In many parts of the world, we're losing our blue sky. You see New Mexico in the past and New Mexico in the present. The word for this, many people call it whiteout. If you travel in a plane, this is what you're going to see from the window. There's a demarcation line where the white arrow is. I call it the spray line, below which the world is seen through a veil, and above which you have that true deep blue sky. We live in the veil. We live in a white world of whatever it is that's descending on us from above. Our visibility is impaired. The sky, as we look up at it, is now a much lighter blue. But the change has been so incremental that most of us are too busy to have noticed. When you look at airborne environmental samples and the soil and water samples that people have collected throughout the country, you get three types of materials: metallic salts, filaments or fibers, and engineered biologicals. Metallic salts are oxides. Aluminum, titanium, barium are three examples. And it appears now that the air around us has been filled with these metallic oxides, which are conductive particles. So the air is no longer neutral. Air is supposed to be neutral to support life. It is not supposed to be charged. The air around us is also filled with fibers. And if you get a black light, apparently you can buy them at Home Depot, you can see, gotta find my mouse, here it is, this. All right, how do you make clouds and rain? Clouds are formed from moisture that evaporates from the Earth's surface, carried upward on air that's warmed by the sun. As the warm air rises, it begins to cool. There's a certain point, they call it the dew point, D-E-W. And at that point, the moisture in the air begins to condense around particulates which are in the air. And these particulates are usually dust or salt. These particulates are called condensation nuclei. They have an affinity for moisture, dust, salt, like water, okay? As more water vapor gathers around the particulates, the combination becomes unstable, which is a raindrop. So we know that particulates in the atmosphere nucleate, meaning they gather into raindrops. Now here is something interesting. Daniel Rosenfeld, he's an atmospheric scientist, Hebrew University, Jerusalem. He claims that pollution particulates actually prevent rain by forming very tiny, very stable droplets that remain suspended and do not fall earthward. Now this was headlines. You can Google, pollution stops rain. If this is correct, then it suggests that the smaller the particulate, the more stable the droplet. So this is how you would get clouds to hang in the sky as haze, or so-called clouds. And so it would seem that you could create cloud-like masses simply by releasing small enough particulates into the atmosphere. And those clouds would not fall. They would spread outward instead to form haze. Which leads us to the subject of geoengineering, defined as the large-scale manipulation of the Earth's environment to suit human needs and promote habitability. Last year, scientists began to discuss something called SAG, stratospheric aerosol geoengineering, which was supposedly spraying soot and sulfates in the atmosphere to form a shield against the heat of the sun. This presumes the notion of man-made warming. The idea being that atmospheric science can rescue us from climate change, which is nature's retaliation against us for creating global warming. For now, we're told that this is a future consideration, but for years, we've already been seeing strange clouds and hazy skies. What exactly is dripping here? This is a photo I took, Cardiff, California, and I call these the bearded clouds. And here you have this new form, they tell us, new form of cloud, a hooked cloud called cirrus uncinus. And here you have asperatus. This is like the canopy effect, blanket. This is another picture I took. I had never seen this kind of cloud before. I'd only seen photos of it, and then it suddenly appeared. The presence of strange clouds, persistent haze, and impaired visibility is not just in the air and sky. It must be having an effect on the ground, on the earth's soil and water. Francis Mangels is a retired federal wildlife biologist and botanist from Mount Shasta. And he notes that between the 1950s and 60s, jets did not leave many contrails. Today, what appear to be jet contrails are much more frequent and last for 10 to 20 hours. And here's what they look like over these beautiful mountains and lakes. Now this would make a lovely view, don't you think? Counting all trails in every direction over Mount Shasta, Mangels says, the FAA indicates there can't be that many flights per day. The number has been as high as over 30 contrails at once, and I've counted 100 just before weather fronts. Typically, heavy spraying days are just before weather fronts that come in from the Pacific. So here you have a photo of this man who is a retired federal wildlife biologist and a water specialist. Lab tests from Northern California show very high levels of aluminum and barium in soil and pond water. Francis Mangels told me that at 100 micrograms per liter, when he was working for the federal government, you were shut down. 1,000 micrograms per liter. So I asked him what normal is, what's tolerable, and he said 5/10, 0.5 micrograms per liter is considered normal. So here you have the findings from pond water in Mount Shasta. You can see 12,000 micrograms per liter. UG is short for microgram, which is 24,000 times normal. Snowdrift at 8,000 feet, 61,100 micrograms per liter. Way, way past normal. And here you have a lined pond. So please picture a lined pond. A pond with a liner, vinyl something, in Bella Vista. And you got a a reading, or the person who did this, I know him, Dane Wigington, got a reading 375,000 micrograms per liter in this little pond. Mangels has, I will repeat, a master's of science in water-related subjects. And he also reports that a house, the soil tested outside this house in Northern California was 3,000 times, 3,000 micrograms of aluminum more than the soil under the house. I'm sorry, I said 3,000 times. Anyway, so what does this mean? It means that something is dropping from above and is affecting the soil around the house, but not underneath it. So you can't say that this is in the groundwater. You can't say this is in the earth itself, coming from the earth. It's got to be coming from the environment. The dying of the trees. I've spoken to Charles Little. He's the author of this absolutely fantastic book, which you can buy still by going to half.com or Amazon used books. It is about the natural or biotic reasons for tree death, and also the effects of industry and deforestation, which began decades ago. When manufacturing exploded, acid rain, different forms of pollution started to affect trees. But what has come along since this book was written is this. Nowadays, we have an effect coming out of the environment that can't possibly be natural. Look at this corkscrew. I took this picture myself. This is the wine opener style. You have nature trying to cope with the introduction of new substances, particularly metallic oxides, which are also the metallic salts. Living things, as I said before, the metallic salts have an affinity for water. So living things take up these salts along with the water that they're seeking. The natural world, which gets its food from the ground, is sucking this stuff up. This is a scraggly pine tree outside the post office in Cardiff, California, where I go every day. And you can see how brittle it is, lots of needles lost. If you look closely at the needles when you stand under the tree, you see that they're all frosted with brown. Signs of tree death are these sagging limbs, these leafless, scraggly branches. You also see infestation by bugs, insects, mites, fungus. These are spider mites that have taken up in a tree that was right next to my house. The entire tree had to be felled because of these white webs in it that were killing off the tree. But again, I'll explain why in a minute. This isn't the primary source of the death. Here you have a phenomenon that Deborah Whitman, who's here with us today, has done a lot of research on. The white, we call it the tube sock effect on trees. You see white bark, and when we tested the bark of this tree, it showed it had these readings, aluminum 387. Now this is milligrams per kilogram because this is a mass analysis rather than a liquid context. So you have barium at 18.4, strontium 113, and titanium 15.2. You can see again in these photos the enormous scorched look. That's a very dying, very unhealthy tree. And you see this other thing called secondary growth. The tufts on the trunk poking out, that's the tree giving itself, desperately trying to give itself a second stab at life. So when you look around you and you see these little growths, sometimes they're all the way along the trunk from the ground up. The beauty of an induced problem is that its twin is the solution. As nature begins to die, we will be told that science will have to step in to save it. So, you'll have GMO trees as the answer. The silent forest, they call it, genetically engineered trees, non-reproductive, no fruit, nuts, blossoms, no insects, animals, birds. Low lignin, that's the wood fiber, which makes the tree very easy to cut and pulp. The silent forest will grow straight and tall and will be replenished by the state. in what will be considered appropriate numbers and in appropriate locations. In May 2010, from this article, we learned that the USDA approved large-scale field trials of 200,000 GMO eucalyptus trees made by ArborGen, biotech company, to be planted from Florida to Texas. Now, we're told that the purpose of the trial planting is to evaluate whether such GM trees can become new sources of wood for paper and biofuels, also in the name of conservation and improvement. This is the story they give us. We're trying to conserve, we're trying to go green, we're trying to help. But then you come up against articles like this, 2008. This was from something called the MIT Technology Review. An article announcing biochemistry's development of toxicity-resistant crops. In particular, in this article, aluminum-resistant plants. So the article tells us that aluminum in soil stunts the growth of crops. Wheat, corn, and barley don't fare well in aluminum-laden soils. But now, plant scientists have found a way to get the plant to shut down its own cell division. To stop the plant from shutting down its own cell division. Because when a plant encounters toxins in the soil, it says to itself, I don't want to keep growing. So it shuts down the cell division. But they have figured out a way to keep prompting those plants to produce reproduction. So this is a gene mutation, a single gene mutation that inactivates a protein so that the plant continues to grow. The quote from this article is very interesting. The plant is effectively blind to what's happening in the cell. And that's from biochemist Paul Larson. The mutant plants can maintain high levels of growth in the presence of toxic levels of aluminum, even if they sustain DNA damage. When something begins to die in nature, it attracts bugs, blight, molds, even viruses and bacteria. This is nature's way of hastening decomposition so that the dying form can become food for other living things. Today, we have an epidemic of tree decline all over the world, not just in America, but it's in Australia, it's in Europe. Thousands of square miles of die-off in the savannas and forests of many, many continents. And in cities and suburbs, trees are rotting as they stand, swooning, breaking. They are hazards to property, requiring removal. 6 trees around my house have been taken out in the last 2 years. Sunlight is a natural disinfectant. As hazy skies limit the sunlight, molds and fungus grow. As plants that are taking up toxins struggle to live, molds, viruses, bacteria begin to take them over. This is all part of nature, and bioremediation will be the obvious answer. Metallic salts have made our air conductive. This means that we and everything around us can transmit and propagate energy. The air is no longer neutral. It no longer supports in a healthy way living things. The second group of materials found in these environmental samples is unidentifiable fibers. And I really want you to appreciate the meaning of unidentifiable. These fibers have been sent to sophisticated laboratories, and there is nothing in the databases that match them. So these are fibers, we could say, that do not exist in nature. People around the world are developing lesions on their skin that ooze and produce fibers. This is known as Morgellons syndrome. Tissue samples cultured from ordinary people without this ailment contain and grow the very same fibers. Here's a 5-inch lesion on a woman's body that has never healed, 5 inches. The fibers or filaments are actually tubules with hollow insides. When these fibers are cultured, they produce colonies of filaments. You can see the extension filaments. And these colonies continue to grow and reproduce, branching out into more filaments and more colonies. The filament cultures can be grown from saliva samples, tissue from the skin, mucus, urine, blood, from animals and people, regardless of the presence of the Morgellons condition. The fibers are segmented with visible structures inside them. So where do these fibers or filaments come from? Airborne environmental samples that were collected by Clifford Carnicom, he is a researcher in this subject, in 2000, the year 2000, gathered at high altitude on a mountain in New Mexico, showed the presence of those fibers, whose structure matches exactly the tubular filaments. When I say fibers and filaments, basically interchangeable, showing up in our blood, tissues, and skin. Additionally, the samples collected by Mr. Carnicom showed what he calls, and was called in biology, desiccated erythrocytes. This is a multisyllabic term, but it means dried red blood cells. So, why these were in the air? Why are dried red blood cells in the air? Very puzzling. A medical microscopist, a biologist specializing in microscopy, confirmed to him that they were human red blood cells, but that they had been engineered in some way so as to be preserved. So again, you have to ask yourself, if I were 5 years old, I would say, Mommy, what are red blood cells doing falling out of the sky? Biology divides life into 3 kingdoms: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Bacteria and archaea are simple organisms with no subcellular compartments. Eukarya are complex with defined cell compartments and internal organelles, mini organs like mitochondria that make DNA and energy for the cell. Plants, animals, and humans are eukaryotic, as are fungi and slime molds. The archaea are the hardiest of the life forms. They're able to withstand grinding pressure, heat, acidity, and alkalinity. They can live in volcanoes, geysers, and the ice shelf. Bacteria, on the other hand, will die in extreme heat and cold, which is why we cook and freeze our food. Now, the materials appearing within these filaments are as tough as archaea. They look like bacteria, and they self-replicate. One looks like something called mycoplasma, but is not. One looks like chlamydia, but is not. And natural fibers, or filaments, would be classified as fungal in the domain of eukaryotes. But these fibers contain forms from the other 2 groups inside them. You're looking at a tubular fiber with self-replicating internal elements resembling bacteria and behaving like archaea. That does not happen in the natural world. So what are they? What's going on? It appears that within our bodies we now have all 3 life kingdoms replicating themselves. What does that make us? Are we still eukaryotes, or are we becoming something else? You could call this transbiology, a crossing of biology, the creation of hybrid forms. Materials are forming in our bodies that are not native to us, not natural, and entirely new. You can see in these pictures the tubular filaments with the branches. They're branching off. That's their self-replication. They're creating new colonies. And you can also see in the bottom picture a little bud. That's the beginning of a new fiber. The territory of things on the scale of atoms and molecules is the nano world. Science has opened up the nano universe, where incredible new creations are possible. Nanotechnology explores materials that are less than a micron in size, or from 1 to 100 nanometers. And a nanometer is a billionth, 1/1000th of a meter. Nature and biology continually work on the nanoscale, assembling proteins and building with crystals to conduct the business of life. Spider webs are an example of that. Very fine filaments with enormous strength and flexibility because they contain nanoscale crystals. So let's go back to the filaments and the structures they contain, these ones that Clifford Carnicom has found. In those unidentifiable filaments, he has observed the formation of red blood cells and submicron-sized structures. So now you've got a filament making its own red blood cells. The engineered cells, the red blood, very, very tough, withstanding excesses of heat and chemicals, indicating that they are designed to endure almost anything. He has put them in a Bunsen flame, he has poured bleach on them, acid, and they still endure. In addition, they are able to replicate, growing outside of the body in a petri dish. This is highly sophisticated technology going on by itself, not in a laboratory. So we're witnessing red blood growing outside, having nothing to do with the bone marrow, in a petri dish, in somebody's very low-level lab. Could it be that artificial materials are being introduced into living things? Here you have, this comes from the nanotech industry. It's what I call the nanotech pyramid. You start with materials, you go up to structures, processes, and devices. Could it be that artificial materials are being introduced into us to create new processes from the ground up, which processes will override our own natural biology, our own internal systems? People with advanced Morgellons syndrome started with fibers coming out of their skin, and they're now observing very strange crystalline forms and metallic devices. The fibers became multicolored, and now they were accompanied by plaques, strange, hard little, almost like shards. People say they're like glass, and they're colored. The lesions keep emitting these things. They don't heal over or close, sometimes for years. Here are more plaque structures, even grooved metallic devices. On the right, you'll see one device, the front and the back. These images are supplied by Jan Smith of MorgellonsExposed.com, who has done extensive research on biotech websites, looking for things that match what comes out of her body, and she's finding them. The fibers from her skin were from high-density polyethylene. And I'm going to read what she's written on her website. The bizarre nature of my findings suggests a man-made source. It occurred to me that if these pathogens were being bioengineered in a lab, they were made of multiple components. The mutated material might reproduce and intermittently send out a batch of identifiable debris, much like the original genetics. I call this type of debris throwbacks. It's her theory that when new life forms are made through this gene splicing and mutation, bioengineering and nanotechnology, they will self-replicate in all kinds of ways, creating different mutations in each generation. Morgellons specimens can sometimes be identified with the original spores before those mutations occurred. Jan found 3 varieties of something called Omycota fungus in her specimens, as well as something else called Dictyostelium discoideum, which is a slime mold that is a major player in biomedical research today. The material coming from her body was ribbony and motile. It was grooved and oval, very much like the Omycota spore you see here. At the bottom, where the purple arrow from the bottom is it's a diagram of Omycota. And on the upper right, you see something that came out of Jan's body that looks exactly like Omycota. The fiber strands that you see here were made of cellulose and GNA. GNA is glucans polysaccharide sugars, and this was confirmed by microscopy. GNA is a synthetic cousin of DNA. It has a 3-carbon glycerol sugar in it instead of the 5-carbon that you find in DNA. Here's a news report from April 2008 in which we are told, big headlines, GNA is DNA's chemical cousin. It's a nanotechnology building block. The Biodesign Institute at Arizona State develops the first self-assembled nanostructures composed entirely of GNA, synthetic analog of DNA. The nanostructures contain additional properties not found in DNA, including the ability to form mirror image structures. An NIH article from Japan, on research from Japan, also tells us that various conductive polymers and gold nanoparticles are entrapped within the helical superstructure of this GNA. Now, the particular sugar found in this GNA is called beta-1,3-glucans. And here you see it under what's called a Raman spectroscope, very sophisticated equipment. It looks, the microscopist who looked at this called it a sugar snake. So this is the GNA that you're looking at. When Jan's fibers were put to a high heat flame, they released what she calls a gold payload. So they dropped out this tiny little bead of gold. And here's more. The fibers that contain a head, she calls it a golden head, orbs, and they all have this payload in them. Here you have a nano array that she found, a couple of them in her body. Nano array is a tiny device used in biotech for DNA hybridization. And on the left, you see a diagram from an industry website of a nano array. And on the slide, you can see actually two of them. She's marked them with red X's that came out of her body, looking exactly like this. And again, I'll say it again, the nano arrays are these tiny devices that are used for DNA hybridization. So, I'm going to repeat my nanotech pyramid. We begin with the emergence of basic filaments, followed by more complex structures. So what processes are going on here? Are these materials combining to form devices that are working together inside us? What is happening to our biology? And remember that tissue samples obtained from ordinary people who have no Morgellons symptoms, no lesions, can be cultured to produce the very same filaments found in people with Morgellons. So we would have to conclude that Morgellons is like the canary in the coal mine, and that only some people are exuding the materials. And could that be because their bodies are rejecting it, while our bodies are integrating it? Jan's body has been sending out these plaques, colored plaques, which are hard pieces of silica. Some of them have these dots on them. They're very small. They require handling with a needle as she places them under a microscope. The plaques are fragile. They can shatter. Quantum dots, which are the colors you see, are nanocrystal semiconductors made of heavy metals surrounded by an organic shell. Now I want you to remember some of these terms. Heavy metals, okay? Heavy metals, aluminum and so forth. So these are nanocrystal semiconductors surrounded by an organic shell, but they are made of heavy metals. And Morgellon subjects are also finding this stuff. Jewel-like hexagons, faceted pyramids, crystals. Hexagons have shown up environmentally, not only in tissues, but they are in environmental fallout. This specimen is provided by Morgellons Research Group, and we have a table here this weekend. Mike and Jennifer from Morgellons Research Group. Here is a pink, ruby-colored pink layered crystal. The little inset image, you can see actually the layers in it. This was an environmental crystal found. Here is something that was not visible to the naked eye, but the woman who told me about it and sent me the photo was looking at hay. She lives in Oregon, and she was looking at a piece of hay under her microscope, and she found this bright pink, teeny tiny little crystal. You get crystals with embedded hexagons, strands that glitter. The one on the right, that's a glittering strand that came out of somebody's body. Here's a picture of tissue from a lesion with several crystals. You can see the arrows attached to it. You can see the fiber coming out from the bottom. You have combinations of wires and those quantum dots. Now here are the nanotechnology dyes. And there you see the colored plaques that have been coming out of people's bodies. One on the below has fibers attached to it. The industry tells us that quantum dots are tiny nanocrystals whose small size gives them unprecedented tunability. Okay? Tunability. The piezoelectric effect is the internal generation of a voltage when an outside pressure is applied, and vice versa. You can Google the piezo effect. The piezo effect occurs in crystals, ceramics, DNA, and certain proteins. So an example is, when you put a frequency to a crystal, it generates a voltage. And when you put a voltage to a crystal, it responds with a frequency. We call this piezoelectricity, electricity resulting from applied compression or frequency. Recent work by Clifford Carnicom reveals that a filament culture subjected to a blue light frequency, that's 375 nanometers, resulted in explosive growth of the culture within 24 hours after the initial incubation. So he put the blue light on, incubated it for 5 to 7 days, and then it exploded into all those little fibers that you see. We now live in a frequency-filled world. I don't have time to address HAARP, artificial weather, and the enormous spread of unnatural frequencies that are affecting the Earth today. But I will say this. I came across a very well-known paper on electromagnetic fields and neurological function, written by Professor Ross Adey, Loma Linda School of Medicine, with the subtitle, A Possible Paradigm Shift in Biology. We learn that the Earth's own natural magnetic field peaks, that means peaks, top, at 32 hertz. And that only happens in certain equatorial thunderstorms. The electronics we use today generate electromagnetic fields that are tremendous in the megahertz and gigahertz, million hertz and billion hertz range. So here you can see Earth and nature up at the top, 3 to 30 hertz. You can see HAARP has a low range. Then you see the Gwen towers, that's ground wave emergency network, the blue. HAARP again has another range right after that. Gwen has another range after that. And look at the phones and internet. We're talking about million hertz and billion hertz. Professor Adey reminds us that chemical bonds are magnetic bonds, formed between atoms by paired electrons with opposite spins that are attracted magnetically. So if nature itself moves in the 3 to 30 hertz range, what is happening to us on the biochemical level with all the different frequencies our bodies are experiencing? What is being done to our biology? Again, I'll repeat Ross Adey's little tenet here. Chemical bonds are magnetic bonds. Electromagnetism is capable of changing what is happening in our bodies. Frequencies are capable of supplying to the synthetic materials in our bodies the force or power that activates them, gets them working, makes them come alive. Nothing about us today is normal. We have hair that glows and skin that shimmers. This is from a healthy woman in Oregon who's been doing microscopy. And if you go to Mike and Jennifer's table, they can demonstrate some of this iridescent effect for you. Here is a glowing little arrow-shaped thing found in rainwater when the same woman who supplied the former previous images, was scanning. She was scanning water from a puddle under her microscope, and she saw this arrow-shaped thing that glowed. And here's a hexagon that grew a fiber in 20 seconds as it was being observed under the microscope. The field of synthetic biology is a new frontier of science. It draws from biochemistry and biomedicine, genetics, robotics, radiation biology, and information technologies. Using nanotechnology, its goals are to improve and transcend the limits of nature. On February 21st of this year, Time magazine had a feature story on the singularity, the term signifying the merging of man with machine. The story was released on Valentine's Day, February 14th, to underscore a love affair the marriage of humanity and technology. The article tells us that a transformation is coming, and our species, Homo sapien, will no longer be recognizable as itself. We will be something new, something better. The time predicted for this transformation is 2045. The man who is making this prediction is Ray Kurzweil, a futurist known for his uncanny accuracy in just this area, the pace at which technology grows and improves, such that it will one day be smarter and better than us. That's the singularity. There's a Singularity University hosted by NASA, sponsored by Google, to teach people about the intelligence explosion. Ray Kurzweil has made fortunes over and over as an engineer and inventor. A documentary about him is called The Transcendent Man. He wrote the best-selling book that you see here, The Singularity is Near, which came out in 2005. Singularity is a word from astrophysics referring to a point in space-time where the rules of ordinary physics no longer apply. Kurzweil has correctly predicted the growth of information technologies. He has made it clear to the world that technological progress is exponential, not linear, which means that advancement begins to advance itself, in a manner of speaking. Exponential curves start slowly and then explode. A quote from the Time magazine article: "In Kurzweil's future, biotechnology and nanotechnology give us the power to manipulate our bodies and the world around us at will, at the molecular level. We ditch Darwin and take charge of our own evolution." The question is, who is we, and what is at will? Whose will? Kurzweil predicts that by 2020 we will have successfully reverse-engineered the human brain. And when hyper-intelligent artificial intelligence arrives, all we have to do is hand ourselves off to it. Armed with advanced nanotechnology, AI will solve the problems of the world. Strong AI, they use this term, is a super powerful, broad-spectrum intelligence that operates as easily and comfortably as a human being. It isn't just a chess-playing computer. It's a machine intelligence that can pass for human in a blind test, which is as close as you can get to consciousness or sentience. Now, once this kind of intelligence is here, what will it do as a newly created inhabitant of the earth? Would it compete with us for resources? More intelligent than we are, would it treat us as lesser beings? Would it recognize that we made it, or would it overrun us? Kurzweil is one of the world's leading transhumanists, number 30 on Time's most influential list. Transhumanists believe that we ourselves should merge with machines. Imagine a time when we can download our brains into a computer and upload a computer into our brains.
The three great overlapping revolutions sometimes goes by the letter G and R. And G stands for genetics. Really, another word for it is biotechnology, is mastering the information processes in our biology. And we ultimately will actually be able to reprogram biology away from disease and from aging. N stands for nanotechnology. In the next 25 years, we will have blood cell-sized devices that go inside your body and keep you healthy from inside. That go in your brain and interact with your biological neurons and allow us to merge with non-biological intelligence. The third one goes by the letter R, which stands for robotics, robots. Really, though, refers to artificial intelligence. And that's the most significant revolution of all. In about 20 years, I've set the date 2029, a machine, an AI, will be able to match human intelligence and go beyond it. So artificial intelligence, which will give us not just more human intelligence, but will actually give us superhuman intelligence, will enable us to solve problems that we're not able to solve today.
Artificial blood cells are mentioned again in the Transcendent Man. Oops. None of this is working. I'm sorry, here it is. Okay.
Biology is very impressive and intricate, clever, but also very suboptimal compared to what we ultimately will be able to engineer with nanotechnology. We are building devices now that are at the nanoscale. This is a design of a robotic red blood cell. Conservative analysis of these respirosites shows that if you would replace a portion of your red blood cells with these robotic versions, you could do an Olympic sprint for 15 minutes without taking a breath, or sit at the bottom of your pool for 4 hours. We'll be able to download software against specific pathogens, including ones that have never been seen before, not be subject to autoimmune disorders. And if you look at what will be in principle feasible with nanotechnology, we can go far beyond the limitations of our version 1 bodies.
The robotic blood cells will supposedly improve us and keep us healthy, as he says. But what if that's just the gloss to sell us on such bodily intrusions? Just as we're being sold on the idea of a smart environment, a techno-matrix that will vibrate with not just intelligence but connection. What indeed is the World Wide Web? We may think it's the internet, but it will be the humming network of everything connected through ubiquitous intelligence, intelligence that is everywhere. Artificial intelligence will connect the world. Homo sapien will be transformed into Homo evolutus. Biological processes will be run by technology. Living things will not be reproductive. The earth will be populated with engineered species, and all processes will be patented, licensed, and controlled. You could consider nanotechnology the installation of artificial intelligence in living and non-living things. Smart dust and smart motes, for instance, are tiny nanosensors that can float and land anywhere. As Kurzweil declares, self-replicating nanotechnology will infuse everything around us with itself.
I see as a person, I'm human, and I'm really limited and restricted in what I do. So if I could come out of the singularity, being mentally and physically upgraded, yeah, I'll go for that. So I don't mind changing dramatically from what I am.
I believe fully there will be flash memories you can plug into your brain. We'll be able to hook our brains into calculators and statistics programs and have Google directly into the frontal lobes. I mean, there's going to be a lot of expansion of the mind through interfacing the human brain with technology. There's an unanswered question of how far can you go and still be human.
As we merge with machines, and I think it's inevitable that we will transform into something new.
And as the technology becomes vastly superior to what we are, then the small proportion that's still human gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it's just utterly negligible.
Anybody who is going to be resisting this progress forward is going to be resisting evolution. And fundamentally, they will die out. It's not a matter of whether it's good or bad. It's going to happen.
You have seen today the deposition and active presence of artificial materials in the sky, environment, and in living things. Nanotechnology has arrived at our personal doorstep without our permission. It isn't that this will happen in 2045. It's already here. Human enhancement is being sold to us as leaping tall buildings in a single bound and having better, faster, higher intelligence, perfect health. But all of that is the sales pitch. Enhancement may in fact be degradation, our being devolved to someone else's specifications. While nanobiotechnology promises in headlines to make our world better, it may in fact be busy taking us over so it can tailor us to the plan for the hive. Already transhumanists are looking forward to the creation of the post-human, an improved human that will have no gender, will not reproduce, will be a better performer in the workplace, will not be distracted by love or lust, will be free of disease thanks to these nanobots keeping it healthy. But all this is part of the fantasy. In reality, thanks to stressors on our physiology, infertility is soaring, our sexuality is diversifying, and the nuclear family is falling apart. Biotech is an exploding frontier. It is clever enough and small enough to enter and change our very cells. New forms of DNA have been invented. There's GNA, as I told you about, and PNA, a hybrid of protein and DNA that will add to our double helix a third strand. When nanobiotech has a firm footing in us, it will be easy to upgrade and downgrade anyone and anything in any way. Oliver Curry, an evolutionist at the London School of Economics, predicted in 2007, the human race will one day split into two separate species, an attractive, intelligent ruling elite and an underclass of dim-witted, ugly, goblin-like creatures. So here you have the e-workers and the elites. Transhumans will presumably be involved in this process, the process of transformation, the process of renovation, remaking us into what someone considers improved. We are transhumans now. Improved is only what fits certain specifications. For instance, a specimen that can work 18 hours a day, a specimen that is sterile, that will never have the responsibility of caring for others, a specimen that is even-tempered, with a narrow, predictable range of expression. All this is enhanced, improved. Better performance is just that, the ability to produce a better result. It does not mean a specimen with greater skills. It may mean a specimen with narrower skills and the ability to repeat a task. So while the current ethical debate is about whether or not we should upload computers into our brains and how human we will be when that happens, there is something happening on the nanoscale right now. What it is exactly is unknown to us. As attempts by lay people to communicate with scientists about Morgellons-type materials are going nowhere. There is a blackout on this subject. Its victims are dismissed as having a psychological problem that is called delusional parasitosis. The presence of patented creations in our bodies gives rise to intellectual property issues. We know what has been done to small farmers into whose fields the winds have brought genetically engineered strains. They are sued by the powerful agricultural companies who own the patents. Will the day come when we are subjected to the jurisdiction of corporations whose patented materials we are carrying in our bodies? It doesn't matter how it got there. The fault is yours if it is simply in your possession. This is a forced partnership between us and them. This is how we will be eternally owned by them. This is how they can push our biology from Homo sapien to Homo evolutus without our having a say in it. For now, engineered technology in all living things is a secret. But one day we may be charged with unlawful possession of something that has become a part of us that we cannot get rid of. The nature of biology is to adapt. As more unnatural elements enter our bodies, if we cannot reject them, we will find ways to accommodate them. You could call it Invasion of the Body Snatchers meets Sleeping with the Enemy. In fact, the original Body Snatchers movie contains some interesting lines. Your new bodies are taking you over, cell for cell, atom for atom, and you'll be born into an untroubled world. Don't fight it, Miles, it's no use. Their bodies were now hosts harboring an alien form of life, a cosmic form. Metabiology was a term coined by the famous Jonas Salk of the Salk polio vaccine. It describes a form of biological prospecting, exploiting genetics, using chemistry, physics, and radiation for commercial and other goals. The 1940s and 50s gave us the birth of radiation biology, the techniques of which were used to decipher the mysteries of heredity, genes, and immunity. Geneticists plumbed chemistry and physics, using X-rays and UV light to irradiate plants, fungi, and fruit flies to see how mutations altered amino acids and enzymes to form a new biochemistry. All this continues today. We are living, walking laboratories for powerful science in a society of increasing control. We are being altered. The future being spoken of is happening now. My question is, how will we transcend this? And I have one more clip for you.
Nanobots will infuse all the matter around us with information. Rocks, trees, everything will become these intelligent computers. So at that point, we're going to expand out into the rest of the universe. We will be sending basically nanotechnology infused with artificial intelligence. Swarms of those will go out into the universe and basically find other matter and energy that we can then harness to expand the overall intelligence of our human-machine civilization. So the universe will wake up, it'll become intelligent, and that will multiply our intelligence trillions of trillions fold. You know, we can't really fully contemplate. And that's really the main reason this is called the singularity. But regardless of what you call it, it will be the universe waking up. So does God exist? Well, I would say not yet.
That's it. I'm waiting.
What do you think, folks? Sophia Smallstorm, pretty amazing research, very important. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you very much. I predicted there would be no applause. And I don't know how much time we have, but, you know,
Do we have a little bit of time?
we can leave any time. You can ask me questions tomorrow. As I said, I don't even know if I could answer them.
Couple of questions.
Yeah. I think I heard the question a little bit. It was about Dr. Mary's monkey.
Speak up.
Yeah, correct. Dr. Mary's monkey.
Yes.
With the Jonas Salk, brought up the Jonas Salk studies with the simian viruses, monkey viruses that contaminated the polio vaccines.
I have a research associate who will be covering this at length on a website called waypasthuman.com. So it was in the list of websites that I gave. But I don't have time to go into Dr. Mary's monkey and the virology issues right now. It's kind of off this subject.
There's a lot of studies that's done that shows that soft tissue cancers are caused by those
Right.
viruses that were inoculated through the polio
If
vaccines
you
in
go
the
to
50s.
waypasthuman.com, which will be up soon, you will find a lot of
Okay.
information there.
And-
So Way Past Human, that's where they're taking us. Don't forget it.
And
who
another
feels-
website, meandlee.com.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Real quick, we've got very, very little time.
Quick comment, given that black budget projects are decades in advance of conventional technology, have some groups already reached the singularity and are implementing it for the rest of us?
Well, yes, I would say that people ask me all the time, well, these people breathe chemtrails. What are they? Don't they care? And the fact is that they want this conversion. They want this convergence. They want this singularity. I couldn't tell you whether they've attained it or not. But this is what is desired for humanity and all living things. And as you saw Ray Kurzweil, he said it's going to be everywhere. The entire universe is going to be filled with material that responds to external control. That's really what it is. Intelligence is just that in their definition.
Is there a way to shut down the Morgellons in your body or kill the nano stuff that's in you?
Well, this is what we're going to have to explore ourselves. Where is this coming from? We have to become metabiological ourselves, beyond our own biology. I don't know if the frequencies that we're capable of generating through our consciousness, this is where you go into metaphysics, and I have not been able to put anything conclusive together, because who am I? I'm just like you. I saw different things. I came on those things with a perspective, and I showed you that perspective here. I just pulled stuff together from afar. I went way out of the box. So we're going to have to go way out of the box. We are stuck here on the third dimension, reacting and responding. We have forgotten that we are creatures of intention, of creation. If we can remember that, wake that up in ourselves, we have a chance. That's where we have to go. Thank you. Okay, no.
Quick question. Have any of these people working on these projects been able to share with you? Are they willing to talk to you and open up?
I've never approached them. I don't believe that they would. Morgellons, I almost called it McDonald's. Can you believe that? That's how ubiquitous it is. Morgellons is not acknowledged. It's acknowledged only as a psychological problem. And in fact, I think it was some large organization just declared it moot and not pertinent.
This is a comment, a question about a previous elite, very strong here in California, called the Eugenicist Society, that were elites, and this is the early 1900s, 1910, they felt the elite, and this is prominent people in universities, that said that certain ethnic types we had to weed out. What we needed is Anglo-Saxon only. We didn't need Eastern European, blacks, Mexicans, Greeks, Irish. And these were leading people in our universities in California, and they influenced the Nazi Party and how they view, superiority. So what I'm saying is, we've had elites make plans for us before, and this is another one where they're making plans for control.
I will just say something quickly. The term eugenics was changed in the early 1950s to transhumanism. It's the same thing. It's just a new word. So the transhumanists are pushing for the post-human. And I will say again, the post-human will have no gender. The post-human will be non-reproductive. And the post-human will be improved in the sense that it will be tailored to specific tasks. Remember the picture I showed you of the dairy cows. The post-human, the improved human, is not going to be Superman. It's not going to be Einstein. It's not going to be anybody fancy. When you have technological control of all living things, you can confer attributes to some, and you can degrade and devolve others. So you and I are going to be the goblins.
Sophia, thank you so much. One more for Sophia Smallstorm. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Could a strange substance found by a southwest Arkansas man be part of a government test? Well, that's the question at the heart of a phenomenon called chemtrails, now getting widespread attention.
Well, they say the government is dumping chemicals on us to control or manipulate the weather.
And they say the unusual-looking jet trails in the sky are actually chemical-laden chemtrails.
People say the government is up there in airplanes spraying all kinds of chemicals to change or manipulate the weather, leaving what you see there, and they call that a chemtrail. So what I look at there and I think are contrails, you're telling me are chemtrails.
Yes, that a contrail would be dissipated by now.
And it's interesting, Dale and Christina, this is of interest not just in this country, but European countries and frankly all over the world. A lot of folks interested in it.
Well, Dave, you mentioned that climatologists and others who study the atmosphere believe that they'd be able to surely spot any kind of signs of an ominous plot.
Our journey started in San Diego, California, where thousands of scientists, engineers, policymakers, and journalists gathered for the American Association for the Advancement of Science Conference. One of the topics was the artificial manipulation of the Earth's climate, also called geoengineering. During the meeting, scientists spoke about the plausibility of implementing geoengineering campaigns throughout the world under the guise of preventing global warming. One widely accepted theory was to block the sun by spraying something into the atmosphere. When they were asked about existing aerosol programs, they stated clearly that no such programs have ever been implemented. But strangely, these proposals sounded exactly like what people around the world are claiming is already happening.
When I found out that the American Association for the Advancement of Science was going to be held down here and the main body of topics would be on geoengineering, I had to come. I had to be in on this. I had to hear what these top climate change scientists had to say.
And that's the other question about chemtrails and whether geoengineering is being deployed right now without our knowledge. I don't have any personal insight into that, other than to say that I've worked in government at pretty high levels in the White House and at state government. I'm personally skeptical of that. But obviously, you never know what you don't know.
Chemtrails. On the internet, they are cited as proof of the government creating clouds to combat global warming.
They claim the American government, with the secret approval of the national government, is covertly using jet aircraft to spray population centres with aluminium, with barium, and with strontium so as to reduce people's immunity and reduce the global population.
I'm always a little bit suspicious because the government doesn't seem that capable to do something on such a large scale.
That is not rain, that is not snow. Believe it or not, military aircraft flying through the region is dropping chaff. Small bits of aluminum, sometimes it's made of plastic or even italicized paper products, but it's used as an anti-radar issue, and obviously they're up there practicing. Now, they won't confirm that, but I was in the Marine Corps for many years, and I'll tell you right now, that's what it is.
And what happens here, military jets, some come out of Key West Air Force Base, and they move off into the atmosphere, and they drop mylar strips. Some could be a little wider, some are small glass fibers that are coated in aluminum. And what the Air Force does is they take their military jets and they dump these out of the aircraft, they fall into the atmosphere, and some take as much to a day to fall down.
This is inevitably military or something going on. The government, the Air Force, you see this kind of a pattern like this, you can rest assured there's something going on. They're actually little bitty magnetic and little bitty strips of, whether it's aluminum.
It's a nuisance to you and I to determine what's real and what's not, but it looks like it is a life-saving operation there for the military.
The apparent motive behind this conspiracy theory is one world government.
Order, I cannot hear.
Mr. Speaker, I want to assure the House that both my ministry and my colleague, the Minister of Health, who have received correspondence on this issue, that this conspiracy theory does not have an iota of truth, and that the trails observed from aircraft simply come from jet engines.
Question number 9. Order.
And I think what an appalling example it is of the new Foreign Affairs spokesperson for the Labour Party that she's spreading conspiracy theories about the United States government.
I think the House has heard sufficient.
It is called geoengineering, fighting global warming by putting a chemical dust in the atmosphere and reflecting harmful radiation back into space.
We take geoengineering to mean deliberate, large-scale intervention in the Earth system.
There are a variety of schemes that have been discussed for geoengineering. A classic example
is injecting reflecting particles into Earth orbit.
Nevertheless, there might be some good reasons to think about alumina. It turns out, first of all, there's been a lot of work on the environmental consequences of alumina in the stratosphere. The big deal really is that alumina has 4 times the volumetric radiative forcing for small particles as does sulfur. And that means you have 4 times less surface area for the same radiative forcing. And this is a much bigger deal. You'd have roughly 16 times less the coagulation rate. And that's the thing that really drives removal. So you could get away, we think, with much smaller mass fluxes.
So that's why we see things like in the use aircraft patent from '89, they talk about aluminum. And that's why we're seeing in the surface water samples aluminum. And here's David Keith saying that aluminum has 4 times the reflective volume surface area. So they'd like us to think that we're talking about sulfur, but here they slipped up and let it out that aluminum is 4 times better to achieving their ends, and it sounds like it's going to be one they don't want us to know the effects of.
The little picture is from a nanofabrication study, which shows you can make very high quality, and do this in just a jet in a very simple way, make high quality alumina particles just by spraying aluminum vapor out, which oxidizes. So it's certainly in principle possible to do that, and there's a big literature that's already looked at that. And you could do that by either building new versions of these aircraft or even re-engineering existing aircraft. So there's some ideas of that. So you go to an engineering firm and you want this done. They don't say this is hard or unusual. They say, okay, yes, we could do it. Aerosol geoengineering looks like it is so cheap that the cost is basically not going to be an issue. That means that implementation decisions will be risk-to-risk decisions. The risk of doing it against the risk of not doing it. And it makes the problem of how we govern it fundamentally harder and different and novel. So I've told you that it's cheap to deliver materials to the stratosphere, and I'm convinced that's true. I don't think that will change. But I think the more we do research, the less easy this will look, the more complicated the environmental effects will look. And that's a good thing, because right now it looks too easy. So I think that if we do more research, we're likely to find out that it's harder and more complicated than we thought, and that the side effects are harder to manage. And that's a healthy outcome that will make it easier to do the management. Of course, the opposite reaction is possible. It's an empirical question, how people will actually react to knowledge about this. Another reaction is to say, if these crazy scientists are so concerned about putting CO2 in the atmosphere, they want to think about these things, then that might actually mean we should be more serious about the risks of CO2 in the atmosphere. And by the way, it's not really a moral hazard. It's more like free riding on our grandkids. And by the way, it's not really a moral hazard. It's more like free riding on our grandkids.
Numerous air quality studies, including from CARB, California Air Quality Resource Board, have named submicron-sized particulates as being particularly harmful for human respiration. Through all the discussions today, I have not heard any mention of this fallout, and has this been studied, and also the effects of a highly reactive metal like aluminum on toxifying soils and waters?
The question is, what would be the effects of these materials on human health if they came down into the stratosphere, in particular small particles and aluminum?
So the collaborators of mine working on the aerosol scheme are actually folks from Carnegie Mellon who focused on human health impacts. And while we haven't published it, that was the very first thing we did, was do the order of magnitude calculation in level pencil and paper, but with an expert on human health impacts about whether there could be an issue. And for aluminum or other particles, there are a lot of toxicological things that need to get looked at seriously. But if you're just thinking about the sheer number of particles and the human health impact of small particles, the answer is, well, we haven't published it. That was the first thing we looked at with some of the leading experts who do epidemiological research on human health impacts, and it's not even close to being an issue.
Clarify, so 10 megatons of aluminum dumped into the atmosphere would have no human health impact.
So let me be more careful here. To separate out the toxicological, so the alumina we've only begun to research and published nothing. Alumina we've only begun to research and published nothing.
Dane looked at him and he said, so you're telling me that spraying 10 to 20 megatons of aluminum, as you said, would have no human health effects? He took a deep breath and he swallowed and he said, let me be more careful here.
We haven't done anything serious on alumina, and so there could be something terrible that we'll find tomorrow. We haven't looked at it.
And that, for me, that was the whole main point of what is going to be coming out to the public. It's the damaging effects of aluminum that are being found around the world in massive amounts. Here's David Keith confronted on this very issue, and he looked, you know, at that point like they just let the cat out of the bag.
We haven't done anything serious on alumina, and so there could be something terrible that we'll find tomorrow. We haven't looked at it.
They're proceeding because they have an agenda that's separate from trying to thwart this crisis of global warming. You know, there's obviously several other objectives, whether it's depopulation, control, weapons aspects, communications aspects, all kinds of things, you know, wild cards that we know nothing about. We don't really know, and I'm not going to attempt to speculate on exactly what the agendas are, but we can see clearly the agendas are not benefiting mankind. You know, it's benefiting the agenda of the elite.
And so I think the question is, how do you draw the line between some activity that is allowed and doesn't need global governance and activities that do require global governance?
Dr. John Holdren has agreed to serve as Assistant to the President for Science and Technology and Director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. I look forward to his wise counsel in the years ahead.
My personal opinion is that we have to keep geoengineering on the table. We have to look at it very carefully because we might get desperate enough to want to use it.
So what would we do if in year 2040 or 2060 there's a severe climate crisis, say widespread famines or Greenland sliding suddenly into the ocean? That the only plausible way in which we could start the Earth cooling this century is to directly intervene in the climate system, say by putting particles in the stratosphere.
We do stuff in the stratosphere all the time, of course, and so it's not as though the stratosphere is absolutely pristine. But you don't want to have people going off and doing things that involve large radiative forcings or go on for extended periods, or for that matter provide lots of reactive surfaces that could result in significant ozone destruction.
You know, maybe I'm putting a particle into the atmosphere because I'm trying to make money, or maybe I'm putting a particle into the atmosphere because I'm engaging in scientific research and trying to understand cloud physics, or maybe I'm putting this particle into the atmosphere because I'm trying to make it rain locally to seed a cloud and get more snow on our ski slopes. And this obviously raises all kinds of questions. It's hugely risky. It will likely negatively impact some people, but we might find ourselves in a situation where those risks seem worth taking.
One of the things that really shocked me was in one of the breakouts they had the benefits of these programs and then the risks. Now the benefits, the one thing that was stated was the just cooling the planet. You know, some of the risks were ozone depletion, droughts in Africa and Asia.
I got to tell you, I came away from this experience after listening to these scientists for 4 days of symposiums, really concerned, because it's clear now that they are justifying, rationalizing, and looking to legitimize some really, really horrible impacts, further impacts on our environment. And they're basically formulating the sales strategy and the implementation and oversight strategy and the funding strategy.
After San Diego, I was shocked by the programs that had been proposed. I decided to write about it. That night when I finished, I sent the article to an online publication with my email address attached. When I woke up the next morning, my inbox was flooded with responses from around the world. Why? Because I had just broken the story on aluminum in geoengineering models, which I had no clue at the time that very few people knew about. Now this metal, aluminum, is being found in massive quantities way above normal levels all over in rain, in soil, and in snow. After that, the calls started pouring in from people who were desperate for someone to investigate. That was the fuel that started the film. Before we started filming, we had the opportunity to sit down with one of our favorite authors and documentarians, G. Edward Griffin, to find out what he knew about the subject. I'd like to talk for a minute about an issue that's getting more and more attention. That's the issue which scientifically is called stratospheric aerosol geoengineering, also called the chemtrail issue.
I'm very aware of the chemtrail versus contrail controversy. As far as I'm concerned, it's an open and shut case. I have been watching the development of jet travel from its very beginning. I used to live near the Los Angeles airport. Remember when the first jets came in and landed? Man, they made a big noise. We never heard a noise like that before. And we used to go down and sit at the end of the runway and watch these jets come in and take off because it was a novel experience. I've been watching jets all my life, and I know about jet contrails. I've watched them. They're vaporized moisture, ice crystals, and they get out there in the atmosphere, and then they effervesce and evaporate and then disappear, and you can see them. Plane moves along, and the little white trail follows right behind it, and usually about 10 or 20 lengths of the plane or thereabouts, and then it's gone. And you can still see them that way, by the way, once in a while. So there goes a contrail. These other things we're talking about are not at all the same phenomena at all. These planes go by, and they billow out this white smoke, and it covers the sky from horizon to horizon. It doesn't dissipate at all. And they crisscross each other. And you see this thing cover the sky and turn it milky, and then people start having trouble breathing, and then you hear stories about the aluminum and barium deposits that they're picking up and the residue. And you put it all together, and I don't see how anybody who's got their eyes open and their mind open can come to any other conclusion but that somebody is spending a lot of money and effort to spray the planet. The question is, why? I have my own theories, but I hope that there will be some good investigative reporters go out there and get us the answer. I know that whenever it's finally discovered, and it will be, the people who are doing it will undoubtedly say, oh, well, we did it for you folks. It's for the greater good of the greater number. It's for the society. It's probably to prevent global warming. Or maybe it's to inoculate people against some kind of a dreaded biological attack. We can't go around shooting everybody in the arm, but we can spray them and save their lives. You see how good we are? We're doing it for the benefit of society. I know they're going to, whatever it is, they're going to say it was for your good, but mine.
Think if we had the ability to steer hurricanes, and the hurricane was going to slam into New Orleans. And let's say you could steer it so it would hit Mississippi instead, where for 100, that means I would be willing to more or less kill 18 Mississippians to save 1,800 New Orleanians. And if you do that knowingly, are you murdering those 100 people? And there's all kinds of equity issues there. Now, also, we might be wrong about our steering, and if we didn't do the research right, maybe our steering would intensify Katrina and even kill more people in New Orleans. And so this question of how do you develop the confidence to know that your intervention will reduce overall damage, and then how do you deal with the understanding that you might be damaging some people who wouldn't have been damaged before while saving people overall?
The spraying appears to be mostly in NATO countries. I've seen it here in the United States, I've seen it in England, I've seen it in Scotland, I've seen it in Canada, and I've had reports from people who live in France. There's a grouping, there's a political grouping here of some sort. It's international in scope. It's not just an American phenomenon, it's international. And anybody that wants to investigate that, I think, has to take that fact into consideration. They're going to find a political grouping and a political motive here. But in my humble opinion, it's not in your good or mine at all. I don't know what it is, but we'll soon find out.
I'm sure that if you follow the old advice, which is follow the money, you'll come to the answer sooner or later.
Soon we realized that we all shared the same need to get this information out there, to share with the public, to let people know what is being done. Ed felt so passionately about the issue, he offered to help us.
Well, the main thing now, since it looks like the budget is going to be met, is to get it done well. We don't come off the tree knowing any answers at all.
Yeah, we're not scientists. We're just asking questions, exactly.
And we've got to be very skeptical about the answers. That's it's totally accurate, totally honest. Why can't people see this? They're not hearing it. They don't know that the facts are not being presented to them. We're very lucky, you know that? Look at this opportunity that's been dumped on us.
I know.
Opportunity.
It's, well, this is
It
going to
really is.
this is going to be a battle. I know that.
A challenge and a battle, but
I mean,
why are we here if it's not for that?
We're going to go to a short break with DJ Foxy.
I go to get hold of Morrow, so it's going to be you for the moment. I'll call him again. So.
Sounds good.
I saw the sky crisscross with chemtrails, and I can't remember if it was in LA or if I was on the road, but I had looked up one day, and I thought, look at that. That's not the flight path, man. That was a grid, a regular grid over the city, and I couldn't believe my eyes.
Milky white clouds.
And, you know, it all seems very obvious, and now the evidence of what we have on the ground with the aluminum, the barium, strontium, and with what we see in the patents and what the geoengineers say are going to happen, I mean, for the everyday Joe, this is a slam dunk.
This is a very delicate moment for the powers that be, because they're taking a covered-up operation like the tropospheric aerosol program, or chemtrails, Project Icarus, whatever, it's had many names over the years, and they're making it overt into a geoengineering scientific shield to deflect sunlight, because global warming's out of hand. So at this very moment, the belly of the beast is right above us with no armor. Whether people believe in chemtrails or not, the geoengineering should be scary enough. And when people learn about geoengineering, chemtrails will then become apparent because they're the same.
So you're talking about a global conspiracy here, then?
Geoengineers propose doing this on a global level.
Off to Redding, California. Guess this is the second step after the AAAS meeting. We'll see what we find.
Right here in Northern California at Dane Wigington's house. He owns over 2,000 acres overlooking Lake Shasta. He told me about some of the challenges that they're having up here. Let's go and talk to Dane. We'll see, what's going on his property. We'll see what he's going through and also what action he's taking based on the test results that he has.
As you know, I have a background in the energy fields. I worked in the first solar plants in the continental U.S. in the early 80s. My home was on the cover of the world's largest renewable energy magazine, so this is my background. My goal has been to alert the public there is a mountain of toxic material falling on us, period. Before about 5 years ago, our skies were typically blue, and now you see it's covered with lines and haze. And virtually nothing you see on the horizon, nothing you see in the sky above us is a natural cloud. I mean, it is virtually all the remnants of these aircraft lines that you see fanning out, spreading into clouds, artificial clouds. But the sky is a very dirty look to it. There's not the white cloud blue sky that we had only a few years ago, but it looks like there's some sort of massive industrial activity or forest fires burning over there. And we see that typically every night. You see, even down to ground level, the clarity drops off significantly, and we don't see that except for the days when we have these long, lingering trails that spread and cover the whole sky. And on certain days, you can see these trails actually dropping vertically like a veil. We assume the particulates are descending, and we have the tests to prove that we are being inundated with levels of aluminum and particulates that are literally tens of thousands of times what would already be considered high. So we're not talking about exposure to a slight percentage higher of these toxic materials. We're talking about quantities, for example, off the side of Mount Shasta. If you can pan back, that's a landmark in Northern California, considered to be a pristine water source. Aluminum or snow sample off the side of Mount Shasta tested 61,000 parts per billion.
This is just ordinary snow water, and people are drinking this stuff when they're hiking on the mountain. And remember, government action is required at 1,000. This is 61 times over the government limit, and our hikers are drinking this poisonous water on Mount Shasta Mountain itself. God. Barium, 83. Strontium, 383.
So this summer, the people climbing are drinking poison.
Basically. I certainly wouldn't want to drink 61,000 micrograms per liter of aluminum.
And again, we've already seen in 5 years soil pHs in this area that have escalated 10 to 12 times, and we can prove that conclusively. Well, this is not speculation. We can prove conclusively that these metals have been in the rain. We have duplicate samples.
Bachelor of Science in Forestry, International School of Forestry at Missoula. Master's in Zoology, specialized in aquatics. 35 years with the U.S. Forest Service as a wildlife biologist. And before that, several years with the USDA Soil Conservation Service as a soil conservationist. Also have run the botany programs, range and grazing programs. And I continue that today. Right now I do a lot of master gardener consultation work.
When I started this garden back in about 2005 or so, the pH here was 5.5, 5.6.
This is the old soil survey of the county. You can look at the page right here. This is my soil right here. It's a Dietz 125, 126 here at my house. And here, the soil reaction pH should be between 4.5 and 6.0. And over there in the pure mud, it's even a little darker. It's 6.8 right there.
And what can this do to plant life and ecosystems?
Well, you haul one of these things out and you start looking at the little things that are crawling around the soil. A lot of times they aren't there anymore. The little soil arthropods that you can barely see on a microscope, you can actually see movement with this. Little tiny macroscopic, look like little moving pieces of dust. Those start to go away. They're not gone entirely, but they start to go away.
This is black oak acorns. You know, this is pieces of cedar wood. You know, come on, folks. This should be very acid, and I'm getting 10 times higher than expected. There's something really wrong here.
But you can see all those reports, lots of them.
Have over 20 reports here.
Well, at least 20. I'd say it'd be closer to 30.
All revealing dangerous amounts of aluminum and barium.
You know, the science is there that something funny is happening.
And the naysayers say, well, so what? Isn't neutral good? Well, no, neutral's not good. Neutral is not good. If your soil is supposed to be 5.6, it should stay 5.6 if you want the forest to be healthy.
And if you want to grow a good garden, you have to keep your pH around 6.0, 6.5.
I think that we just need to wake up and just look at what's happening, because we can't just ignore it, because it's going to get worse and worse if we just keep ignoring it and pushing it away like, oh, that's nothing. There was mason jars, and they were brand new, sterilized, and that's what we catch the rain in. And then there was a HEPA filter that we tested the air with.
Okay, so you caught rain and then you basically filtered air. What did you find?
Aluminum and barium.
Here's another test that's revealing 375,000 parts per million aluminum, barium at 3,090, and strontium at 345.
Yeah, that's from a lined pond.
With EPDM fish-safe pond liner. There is no chemicals, manufacturing materials at all in that pond liner that's available to the aquatic life. It's designed for that purpose. The well that feeds this pond has been tested and retested. ND, no detectable aluminum, 0. The only other place this pond can receive water is rainfall. We are located on a filtered, forested hilltop, miles and miles and miles away from any industry, highway, and so forth. After several heavy spray days, there was a film that we received formed on the surface of the water, and we tested that crust, and it was aluminum and barium. That after a year and a half's accumulation had 375,000 parts per billion of aluminum in it. It's literally toxic. We can say conclusively that what we see in the sky matches expressly what's outlined in numerous patents, and the materials on the ground match those patents. This material was not there 5 years ago. It is a recent phenomena in the quantities it's in. It has escalated in some cases 50,000% in 5 years in the case of aluminum. From our original baseline reading of 7 parts per billion, which was already high, it has escalated up to 50,000% in 5 years. And we've seen profound changes in that time.
Dr. Leonard Time, PhD in chemistry, I cross-checked with him, and he says the oxides of aluminum, barium, and strontium will drive your pH into the coastal, from an acid soil like this up into the neutral. There's no question about it.
And that's exactly...
That's exactly what you see happening.
Wow.
I have a doctorate in inorganic chemistry from Oregon State University, in which I was working with different metals and oxidation states, and then did a postdoctorate work at Brandeis, where I was working stabilizing off oxidation states of different metals. The goal is to sort of figure out how everything fits in the dynamic equilibrium of life. I was working with Francis up in Mount Shasta, and he showed me some rainwater analyses that had to do with levels of aluminum, strontium, and barium in the atmosphere. So I feel the major toxin in these chemtrails is the aluminum. And from the levels we were looking in at Mount Shasta, this is totally, totally unacceptable. When you get to metals and biological systems, you're no longer talking about the bulk aluminum that people think about when they're drinking from soda pop cans and that. So once it gets to the aluminum oxide stage, it just forms a plaque within your arteries and shuts down life. When you take elements that normally aren't out in the environment and you start putting them in the environment, it raises some serious red flags. Aluminum is a very specific nasty in biological systems. It takes that site and it never lets go, and it shuts down the site, and that's it. And so as you accumulate aluminum over time, it causes major neurological damage because it ends up as aluminum oxide that's essentially stuck in place and can't be flushed out by normal systems.
At the core of everyone's condition, there's always some level of toxins. And aluminum is known to have cancer-causing effects. The half-life is decades. I think that we should be working on taking more of these toxins out of our environment instead of adding more toxins in. It's very concerning that if we add more toxins to our environment, that will be increasing the rates and risks of cancers. Even one patient is not worth it. So sad that they would consider putting aluminum in our environment to affect something when they could be causing so much more damage.
Wherever the material is coming from, it is there. The amount of metal falling on us cannot be disputed. Absolutely, this is not speculation. The amount of metal in the last 4 years, as I said, have increased to a degree of thousands of times, and California Air Quality Resources Board has studied the aerosols from China. These metals are not amongst them. Mike, the reason I've chosen to focus so primarily on this issue is I feel all other issues are secondary. What could be a greater priority than not being able to walk out your door and take in a breath of air without sucking up heavy metals? If our land base is being poisoned, if our waters are being toxified, what will we have left to work with? Whatever we choose to focus our time and energy on, whatever our political beliefs, that this is a common ground for all of us. We must have air that we can breathe that's not full of toxic chemicals and metals. We must have water that's not completely laden with whatever is being emitted from these aircraft. And if people stopped to consider that the atmosphere is as thin as a layer of paint on a basketball, it is an extremely thin layer that allows life to exist on this planet, to simply treat it as a physics lab and experiment with it until it is broken beyond repair is folly of unbelievable proportion. And if people understood that this sort of experimentation not only is going on, but has been going on for a very, very long time. Going back 50 years, there's been countless climate manipulation, weather modification programs that the vast majority of the public is completely unaware of. And if they think that this is not true, that certainly that somehow they would have known if it was occurring, I would ask them to look at things like Agent Orange and the things that governments do because they can, because there's no one to stop them, because they have these huge military machines that want to control everything. And in fact, the government's own document, perhaps you may have seen, it's available to any online, is called Owning the Weather, an expressed goal of our government, and not just our government.
You told the Associated Press that the American government has created weather tampering techniques so that the New World Order will be able to starve millions of Americans and to control the rest.
There is weather control techniques. Number one, the entire patents on the equipment. Number two, Senator Claiborne Pell's complete statement and story of his own that not only does it exist, but that we even utilize it as far back as the Vietnam War.
Well, Murph,
we're going to do what we can.
Let's see what we can do. You got the scientists behind you. The scientists are with you, so at least this scientist is with you. I may not have $1 million budget, but I've got enough to show that something's dreadfully wrong.
You got it. All right.
So Arizona will be this Monday, the 21st. Senator Johnson up in Show Low. So we're going to be in the car a long time. Well, it is such a pleasure.
This is such an excellent place back here, I'm
Yeah,
telling
this
you,
is
Michael. But you know what?
is great.
We love it. It's so private and it's so quiet and peaceful. And please come in. My name is Karen Johnson. I served in the Arizona State Legislature for 12 years. I was in the House for 8 of those years and in the Senate for 4 of those years. When you see a plane fly overhead, there's a trail that leaves the end of that plane, and it goes from one horizon all the way to the other as the plane flies across, and it begins to filter out and cover more and more of the sky in kind of ripples. It widens out and fills the whole sky. I mean, how could anybody think that that was the case? And then to live and to be underneath that and know that whatever is in that is falling down upon you and upon your animals and upon the earth. And I mean, it's frightening to me. And if people don't start really waking up and facing the fact that we've got people that are doing terrible things to us, and we had better wake up and fight back now. I mean, I'm the mom of 11 kids. I've got 35 grandkids. I mean, I've got a stake in this. I care about what is going to be left for my children. I care about it, and I'm extremely worried about what is going to be left to them.
Aluminum is toxic, and we know that it's accumulative. And we know that we're getting more. So we're absorbing it in the air, we're drinking it in our water, so we are accumulating more. So the thought of more aluminum being dispersed in our environment in the way that you mentioned is very frightening to us and very disturbing to us. Those of us who have done any research on this are really quite concerned that we are ill-informed about this issue, and mostly that it's being done. Aluminum is toxic. We know that it is. We can debate as to the amount of toxicity that is going to be disturbing the body, but as far as really accepting the fact that it's accumulative, it's synergistic, then we have to conclude that it's not a good idea to put it in our atmosphere, especially when we know we're getting increased amounts, and especially since we know that the scientific communities around the world are pointing a finger at the heavy metal toxicities, at the toxicities that we're absorbing in the day-to-day food that we eat and the air that we breathe.
The concern is off the charts about why is this happening? Why is this being allowed to be sprayed continually all over the United States, all over the world? Who is paying for this? I mean, the incidence of Alzheimer's has just skyrocketed, which evidently has to do with an accumulation of aluminum in the brain cells. I mean, I think almost every family has been touched by a member as they get older having Alzheimer's. And it's a horrible disease. And to say that, well, this just came because people drank soda pop out of aluminum cans, you know, when my father passed away with Alzheimer's and he didn't ever drink soda pop, You know, that explanation doesn't ring true with me. And so I'm wondering, how much did this chemtrail spraying back in the Illinois area affect him?
Aluminum and fine metal is an accelerant.
Our friend who's a firefighter up in Pine, Arizona for 20 or 30 years says that the wildfires now that they're fighting are way beyond anything they've seen before in intensity. And when you look at the air samples and you see the fine particles of aluminum, which is very flammable, and magnesium settling on the trees, this is causing unprecedented savage wildfire.
But if you look at this, you can see these are parts per million. They sent this to me, and I just found this to be extremely interesting because we should have like 2 parts per million of aluminum in our air. And this is saying that there's 39,000 parts of aluminum. That's astronomical. Barium is high. I mean, these are way off the charts of what people should be breathing or what's coming down on them. And, you know, if people wonder why their health is deteriorating, why they're having to go to emergency rooms, why they can't breathe, you know, why they're getting Alzheimer's, this has been planned. We have elites, I don't know what you want to call them, one worlders, Illuminati, I don't know, whatever you want to call them. But with these people that don't care about the average person. They only care about themselves, their greed, their power, and if they eliminate, you know, 2/3, 3/4 of us from the planet, so much for the better for them, because then they don't have so many people to have to herd around and worry about. So this is a lot what this is about, and this is very, very alarming and scary. I mean, where is this stuff coming from, and why? Why is this kind of stuff being put out there? You know, I've heard different explanations about, oh, we need to cool the planet, all this and that. But if people are up there trying to cool the planet, why do they need all this kind of stuff in it? The explanations just never have really rang very true.
And as I'm setting up the equipment, she looked at me and she said, all these trees here are dying. And I said, what? She says, all these trees in here are dying. So I thought, well, I'm going to test for aluminum, because that's one of the key things in the programs that we're talking about, and titanium. And I took some of this bark sample and tested it, and it came back positive with aluminum and titanium. Then I started traveling around California, noticing the same thing. In Lake Tahoe, there was a lot of the same type of bark, all through Sacramento area and Davis. Just about everywhere I went, I was noticing this silver-white bark. What I think is happening is these chemicals are getting down and destroying the roots. And then as they come up, they're going out into the bark.
Those two right there are the ones that are just, it just hurts so bad to see these two, because look how old and big they are. We probably lost 40 trees right here on our 10 acres. Every week, every other weekend, we'd see another tree that was beginning to die. And I mean, it's just so sad, we'd just cry. And to think that that might have something to do with it, along with their other explanations, would really, really frost me. Every time you lose a tree, you know, it's not good, it's just sad. And there's another one over here in this little group of trees here. Don't you feel better when you stand up and fight than if you crawl down in a little hole and go to sleep? You know, I mean, my gosh, people, your families are out there, children are out there, your grandchildren. I mean, you've got to do something to help.
My greatest hope is to get people to question. And hey, if they don't wake up while we're there, I'm hoping to plant some seeds. We're going to the most beautiful place on the planet, Hawaii, to see what's going on, collect some data.
Thank you for having fun with us. Hope you enjoyed the trip. Have a great vacation and welcome home if you're lucky enough to live here. Thank you.
The whole valley's off the grid, so it's either solar, wind, or generators.
Look at this, man.
Yeah, the mind can't even conceive of a dream of this.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Even coming here, and one would never think, you know, in paradise that it's getting destroyed.
And they're doing it island style. They do it off the island, right? They do it off the island, so they don't, you know, you don't see the chemtrail airplane.
The theory is that they're spraying
the ocean,
offshore, and
It's coming in on the...
And it's coming in.
Now these are coming from the west. They're also spraying on both sides today. A lot of this stuff is actually chemtrails coming this direction.
There's material that's blocking. We should be able to see to the horizon, you know, where the Earth curves, because we're high enough and we have the ocean, right? So we should be able to see. We should be able to see the Big Island. It's only 30 miles away.
And you can see it's not a blue sky behind it. That's the key. It's all, you know, has that kind of weird looking blue, like silver blue, I call it. And this is a nice day. You know, there's no more blue sky. The night, we're gonna look at the stars at night, and it's like, you'll see, you can count them. There's so few stars at night now. There should be hundreds of thousands of stars, and I can count the stars. There's like one here, and one planet here. It's like, you might see, some nights you'll see 100, some nights you'll see 10. This is what concerns me, this kind of stuff right here. It's just soft.
Okay.
This just comes right off, this bark. That's not natural. For I've seen hundreds of thousands of coconuts, and I've never seen it falling apart like that. Look at this, you guys. I've never seen anything like this. I used to trim trees all the time in the Big Island. I've never seen anything like that. That's why I'm concerned.
Not an easy task that you have here on the island. I could see the skepticism because it is so far beyond anybody's reality.
It's amazing. It's just amazing to try to look through somebody else's eyes. Like my eyes, I can see this, so it's like night and day. And other people, it's just the illusion is just so deep.
What do you think would happen if everybody awakened to what was going on and what the plans were of geoengineers?
I think they'd have a revolution in Hawaii if people really understood what was going on.
What's your concern for? I know that you love the land here. What's your concern about the chemtrails?
Well, that we won't be able to live here and grow our own food, and that our health is going to be compromised.
You think it already has been?
Yes. And the thing is that they're doing it every day here, every day. So it's hammering, micro doses every day. And then, of course, it's getting in the environment, and of course, it's weakening the plants. And it takes a couple years for this to actually weaken the plant. So we are asking for GMO taro. We're asking for GMO papaya because we can't grow our natural seeds. We can't be sustainable. We can't truly, you know, be here as God created us to be.
So my friend convinced me to do a hair analysis on my daughter. So we went ahead and cut close to her scalp and got some really recently grown hair and sent it in. I was just sure that my daughter's hair was going to be so clean with the lifestyle that we live. And lo and behold, it came back and her levels were really high in aluminum. This is the chart here. This is the reference range, and this is where my daughter is, 23.1. Aluminum. The skies are covered with a white mist, and I look up at night anymore and I don't see the deep, dense stars that I used to, and I can't help but think this obviously has something to do with my daughter's health. I don't know where else these heavy metals are coming from.
Yeah, I mean, look how old she is. Yeah. She's been isolated here.
Here, and she's...
Here. Anybody looking at the situation would be like, this is paradise. This child should be like superhuman.
Organic farm.
And here you are getting all this heavy metal stuff.
She has highest level aluminum on the chart.
Never had a vaccine either. Folks, these people are playing God. They are playing God. They're manipulating the weather, and they're spraying stuff into the sky. They are trying to geoengineer everything, including your plants and trees and your ocean. Well, tonight, we're just hoping that instead of not looking at it, you'll start looking into it, because I really believe from the bottom of my heart that we are in a real crisis. I really do. They are proposing dumping 10 to 20 million tons of aluminum into the upper atmosphere. What does aluminum do? It changes the pH of soils, which is toxic to plant life. Also, it's very toxic to human health. Are they doing it? Well, let me tell you about my experience and what we found. We have much evidence that not only suggests, but I believe prove that they are happening. Jeff, what's going on?
And as I promised, we're joined right now by a very special guest, Michael J. Murphy, currently on location in Hawaii. He's working on a documentary film called What in the World Are They Spraying? Michael, welcome to the program. Great to speak with you today.
I had a friend who recently, he's always looking at things from a different perspective. He's a bit of a conspiracy theorist, you know, and he says that whenever the president comes to LA, there's no spraying that week.
Could you have a better place for an interview? I mean, look.
Well, this is being done over our farms and over our things. So basically, they want to eliminate our ability to eat organic food, have clean water. So in some ways, it sounds to me like, and you know, again, it's just a projection, but it sounds to me like this is control. How do we control the masses? Yeah. How can aluminum be good for you in any?
And what was the second chemical you mentioned?
It's barium.
Barium aluminum. Obviously, those are toxic to everything.
To human health.
To human health, to farms, to animals, to everything.
61,000 parts per billion.
And there should be a government alert at 1,000?
At 1,000, people are drinking this. People that climb the mountain, they're drinking that snow. It's poison.
Oh my God, that's so disgusting.
So that's 60,000 times above regulation.
Exactly.
60,000 times above regulation. And I've talked to friends, and they're like, well, that's just ice. That's just condensation. And I'm like, you can talk to a second grader. Ice doesn't float in the sky and spread out that way, you know?
You're not an expert, but you're a concerned citizen who said, wait a second.
Who's actually doing the research.
Yeah, you're doing the research, and that's what we need to do as Americans and say, you know what, I want to know what's going on. I want to know what the FDA is doing to my food. I want to know what the government's doing with my air, my water, and the soil. And, you know, it's just great what you're doing, and I just, my kudos to you for bringing light to this subject.
Put all of the theories aside, just what geoengineers are proposing and what's being found is scary enough. So we can just address that.
And I encourage more people to just step up and ask questions and do what he's doing. So thank you, Michael, very, very much.
Aerosol spraying aluminum affects everywhere, and we have a beautiful tropical climate which I believe might be in jeopardy. So we wanted to not only come and bring the message of what people were finding around the world, but encourage people to test for the aluminum, strontium, barium. Essentially, I think it was an effective trip. I saw a lot of people here in Hawaii, in Maui, awakened, not only curious, but willing to look into this deeper, and that's my only hope.
This is one of the boldest moves, I think, from Ed Griffin yet. This is the taboo topic that nobody's supposed to talk about, and that is aerosol spraying. Now, we've got tons of documented proof of errant aerosol spraying. It just blows my mind that the whole essence of humanity has always been to look up into the sky and ask why. Though there are no limitation, there's endless space, an endless universe. Now, in the 21st century, we're not allowed to do that. Anyone who looks up and sees the giant grids and the X's in the sky that weren't part of our existence until just a decade or two ago is somehow called a kook. And the people that are the best and biggest proponents for the revolution and for liberty, they don't want you to talk about it because you could discredit them.
it seems to be an industry that's being built up to milk the taxpayers by undergoing some kind of a giant global spraying program to make all kinds of money on the project. And they don't seem to care really what effect it has. They're not trying to experiment to see if humans can survive it or anything like that. They just want to get this stuff up. And then we discover, as we're going further down the line, that there are companies generating genetically modified organisms, or seeds, modified seed crops they're being engineered to resist the aluminum in the soil. And a lot of crops won't grow in that. And so now, after they've messed up the soil, all the farmers were going to have to go back and buy seeds that have been genetically engineered to resist the aluminum that have been put into the soil. And all of a sudden, mankind is completely dependent upon these companies like Monsanto and other giant agricultural firms. You can't even grow natural seeds anymore. And we're looking at that. It's a shocking thing. I hope we don't find that that's true. But all the arrows right now are pointing in that direction.
We get into cost-benefit analysis here because there's also HAARP could be involved in this. Geoengineering, as you guys mentioned, which is documented heavily in Dennis Kucinich's bill, that is the Space Preservation Act, which, by the way, I don't think got through Congress. And then Kay Bailout, as we call her here, Kay Bailey Hutchinson, also put together some legislation in order to qualify geoengineering, which, again, is supposed to save us all from global warming. But it is cost-benefit analysis because they can benefit on so many different levels. Ed, that's how they do everything, isn't it?
That's right. And, you know, there's an old adage, if you just follow the dollar, follow the buck, you get to the source of the problem. And it looks to me like there's a tremendously profitable industry being built up right now around this concept of geoengineering or weather modification or reducing global warming and all of these other things that can be sold fairly easily to an unsuspecting public. They all say, oh, well, that's good. We don't want global warming, you know. And so they put up with this, and they don't question, they don't criticize. But behind the scenes, you see a whole industry being built up, which is, as I say, tremendously profitable. And the money for all of that is coming from the taxpayers. And it's a scam is basically what it is.
We're just focusing on the one area that is real easy to prove. There's no speculation in the area that we're going into. They definitely are doing this geoengineering. They definitely are talking about it. They're working up formulas for it. They're putting together strategies for it. They've got funding for it. Everything is in place. We don't even have to go into those other areas to make the case. Okay, let them believe that, but at least they must understand that there's no question that they're talking about it and planning to do it. And so shouldn't they be equally alarmed about what they're going to do if it can be shown that barium and aluminum and some of these other toxic metals are very destructive to the planet and destructive to human health? Isn't that enough? You know, how many issues do we need to crank into this? And so, you know, if you're going to kill the planet and kill the population, do we need any other reason to be alarmed?
What in the world are they spraying? Thank God people are asking this question. That's all we want. We just want to be able to ask these questions. Our good friend G. Edward Griffin, all these years, Mike Murphy and Paul Wittenberg are doing this great effort with your help. This is a community effort to get people real information. What in the world are they spraying? Any final quick comments before we're out of time?
And my only final thought is that we asked the question, what in the world are they spraying? And we now know what it is. And folks, you're not going to like it.
I'm Peter Vreke. I'm from Belgium. I'm 54 years old. I can't believe it myself. I'm a very happy and grateful person.
We are doing the job the police or the Justice Department or the Environmental Department should have been doing. And it's really essential that it's going to be a grassroots revolution. I think so. God is on our side because we are not fighting against, but for.
Yes, we're fighting for.
I was in the council for about 25 years and also a period as the mayor. So from that moment on, 10 years ago, everything started to change. I start to get a picture of what is really going on. And it became crystal clear to me that we, humankind, have been manipulated and dominated and exploited for centuries. So, and this chemtrail phenomenon made me angry because I was so helpless. You can decide what food you're going to eat, what you're going to smoke, what water you're going to drink, what kind of life you're going to lead, but not with this phenomenon. Then you are just a victim. It's only a game. And there have to be good guys, and there have to be bad guys. And luckily, we are in the position to be able to play the role of the good guy who has the chance and the opportunity to overcome.
3 days that we shared with them, my heart just dropped because it was such a beautiful way to live and such a peaceful way to live. I left thinking, what's this going to be like in 10 years? Is everything going to be killed off on the property? And if it is, how are they going to get their food source? Are they going to have to take a class, you know, and get certified by company XYZ? And what are the requirements for that? And that really is the end of freedom. I'm concerned about that. I definitely, I really am. Yeah.
I learned to say everything is now as it has to be now. And everything is going to be okay.
It's going to be all right.
It's going to be okay. Yeah.
Yes.
I have this deep feeling that in the end we will prevail because we have the right on our side. The cosmos is helping us. And I have this strong feeling that we are being supported by entities and by forces we can't even imagine. Here for the first time we have this scientific proof that we are being spread. We are being spread, and it's incredible and it's hard to believe, but we are being spread. I think at this moment to stop is not an option. Once you know it and once you have a tool like this and an opportunity like this, that the issue of chemtrails or persistent jet contrails or whatever name you use for it, that this phenomenon is recognized as being real, publicly debated on. In the context of geoengineering, I think it's high noon to bring this to the public.
This is what the sky is supposed to look like. These are old paintings. We forgot this, I'm afraid. In the years that I have been a medical research journalist, I have looked at many, many things, and I found the same three issues in whatever I'm looking at. And that is that we are being dumbed down, we are being made sicker, and we are being made infertile.
Citizens gathered from around the world in Belgium for the first International Chemtrail Symposium. The event attracted leading professionals, politicians, and activists who discussed the health, environmental, and social implications of these programs.
Today it's only going to be about facts, documents, figures, patents, licenses, everything that brings us to the truth.
We have no other weapon against this vast complex than exposing and bringing their dark works in the light of the truth. We have the hope that by our efforts, more and more people will become aware of the fact that we are deceived by our leaders. So today, we, as a family, join forces with the people who publicly made known to the world that chemtrails are not a conspiracy theory, but a conspiracy fact.
From the Technische Universiteit Delft in the Netherlands. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Koen Vermeer.
Well, I'm Koen Vermeeren. I'm a university professor of Delft University of Technology.
Usually people are with their heads to the ground in their own two-dimensional space and they don't look up. But if you do, you see more and more spaces like this. And it worried me too. I have no explanations to our students about these phenomena.
And then I studied it myself and I found out that I couldn't give them the answers they wanted, because I think that the phenomenon is not natural. It's not natural what is happening, and the explanations that are given to us are not enough for me.
If you look at them from a scientific point of view, the first thing a scientist does is trying to explain something. Because I'm smart and my students are not as smart yet, so I have to give them answers to questions. But if you ask most scientists honestly, they cannot answer all your questions.
If people are using climate control all over our heads, I want to know about it. I want to know the consequences, I want to know the health impact, I want to know everything. I need, as a teacher in my university, to give answers to my students. And they have good questions. And I don't have the answers, and I want to know.
Excellent.
And we should discuss this.
Ladies and gentlemen, for here you in the auditorium and for all over the world, Michael Murphy.
Well, thank you very much. It's definitely an honor to be here in Belgium. The people who are in power control everything. They control the markets, they control us. Now they're even controlling the weather. And they can use that for warfare applications. The one thing that they cannot control is what God had originally made, and that's natural organic seeds. This is called the Hegelian dialect. It's called problem, reaction, solution. The problem here is massive amounts of aluminum, things starting to die. The solution is company X that says, hey man, you're not getting yields on your crop. Everything's dying. But I got the solution. I got a seed that will grow in this environment. The only problem is now you have to start buying from me. We're a little concerned that maybe part of this agenda could be to kill off anything that's natural and organic and re-engineer it with aluminum-resistant GMO seeds. Many may know we just got back from a week of filming in Hawaii, and it was an incredible trip. A big concern for the people there is they're beginning to see softening of the coconut trees. But their concern is that these programs may again be part of a broader agenda to destroy anything that's natural and organic, so that the corporate redesigned GMO foods might be the only source of food for people.
I didn't anticipate so many people, young and old, who are interested in this phenomenon and are concerned about it. And I especially liked the address that the young girl gave today. Only 17 and already making an address to the audience. That is, well, incredible.
My name is Sofia Xenidis. I am 17 years old. It is quite scary to know that the air we breathe is not what it's supposed to be. That the food we eat and the water we drink contain traces of those substances which are sprayed out over all of us, as though we were being poisoned like insects. The feeling that this is causing me are feelings of deep anger and rage. I don't want to be poisoned, I don't want to be infected with cancer, and I'm just so angry that this global poisoning can be going on such a massive scale, and not enough is being done to stop this crime.
A clear answer to one question. Are we being sprayed? Have we been sprayed? And is it their intention to spray again and again? What are we going to do about it? How are we going to deal with it? How are we going to stop it? I know the answer. There is only one person who can stop it. And you know it. You are. You are the person, the one you have been waiting for. We are magnificent, beautiful, godlike, divine human beings. Ladies and gentlemen, sisters and brothers, in this auditorium and in the whole world, thank you so very much for being present with us. And for now, please enjoy this anthem.
So, anyway, I'm glad that the weather's been good for you fellas so far. Just think if we were doing this in the wintertime, you might, if you're going to Washington, D.C., you might run into snow.
Thank God we're not.
That's right.
You know, it's interesting because of the different weather modification programs. There's something like, I think, right around 32 in the continental U.S. alone going on. So the theory is that geoengineering is in part weather modification.
You know, Mike, that's a very good point. There are so many subsets connected with this issue of geoengineering. People are writing to us all the time with information about the connection to global warming, the connection to weather modification. Some people think there's a connection with Morgellons disease. Others think it's kind of a means of transmitting electromagnetic impulses from the HAARP antenna system up in Alaska and Siberia. Boy, it gets your head spinning. And each area, I think, is worthy of investigation, but we have so little time. I think it's wise for us to stay focused on just the aerospraying and the toxic effect of these chemicals and the destruction of the planet and the damage to human health. What more do you need than that to convince people that we have to put a stop to it? So to stay focused, I think, is our mission on this one.
Jeremy, we had an idea. We know that you know the political system real well. Our idea was this. We have a ton of data and information that we've collected throughout our travels, and you know, we really think a good way to end the film would be addressing this to elected officials, some of the senators. So we were wondering this, if you might be able to come and kind of help us out and perhaps show us the way in how to get this done politically.
But it sounds like a really good idea, and I'm also going to get to, in terms of researching who it is that we should really focus on talking to about this. At the very least, if we could make it impossible for them to claim that they don't know at this point, we can strip away their plausible deniability that they haven't heard of the data that points to geoengineering stratospheric aerosol operation already going on. At the very least, it should be very interesting to go to District of Criminality and put some people on alert.
Yeah, you have a lot of enemies in Washington. That's where all the power comes together and the money, you know. So there are people there, I'm sure, that just don't want us to do this job. But I'm glad you're going, and you'll find out.
We took the data to Washington, D.C. There we presented our elected officials with the following letter. According to the 5th article of the Bill of Rights amending the Constitution for the United States of America, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. But the daily spraying is depriving all persons living within the United States of life, health, liberty, and integrity of our common and private property without due process of law. As a representative of the people of the United States of America, we insist that you do everything in your power to protect us and immediately put a stop to geoengineering spraying at once. There exists no justification, legal or otherwise, to poison the planet and its inhabitants.
Now suppose that space aliens arrived on, maybe they're going to land at the UN headquarters down the road here, or maybe they'll pick a smarter spot. But suppose they arrive and they give you a box, and the box has 2 knobs. One knob is the knob for controlling global temperature, maybe another knob is a knob for controlling CO2 concentrations. You might imagine that we would fight wars over that box, because we have no way to agree about where to set the knobs. No global governance, And different people will have different places they want it set.
Solar engineering is like chemotherapy. No one wants it. But we all want the ability to do chemo and to understand its risks, should we find ourselves with dangerous cancer.
How long does it last up there?
The lifetimes are years.
What,
Years,
years?
a couple years.
And then it what, precipitates out, or
Yeah, that's correct.
no toxic side effects that we know of?
The thing we always wonder about is the unknown unknown.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking about, say, the acidification, it's clear that's not a problem. There's several studies that showed that.
Right.
But of course, the concern here is with so little research, there may be some unknown that comes out of left field that bites us.
My name's Mike Murphy. I'm a filmmaker in from Los Angeles. We're covering an issue called geoengineering.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Senator, a quick question about the issue of geoengineering.
I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about.
And wondering if you were supportive of geoengineers' proposals of spraying 10 to 20 million tons of aluminum into the atmosphere.
I should really get a briefing paper on it before I give an opinion.
Oh, not a problem. Are you aware of the issue?
Not completely.
At all? Because, okay. Do you have a letter from constituents, and people have concerns?
Yeah,
We're making a documentary about the
I don't know. You guys have credentials to be here?
Yes, yes, we do. We pass through security as well.
Endowed by our Creator.
I think so.
Please don't
Put
touch
that.
Please don't touch my property.
You're lying.
No, why? What did we lie? What did we lie about, sir?
No, we're not.
What are we lying about? Lying about what?
It's a little unusual, huh?
I haven't heard that.
Okay. You're not aware of it? And it appears that these programs have already been deployed.
You know, I haven't looked at that proposal, and so, you know, why don't you let me review it?
I can do that. Are you aware of?
Actually, I'm going to go.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and get that. I will take a look at this, and I will act accordingly.
General, this program, this openly covert program of the aerosol spraying, stratospheric aerosol spraying, geoengineering, using tons of aluminum, spraying it up in the sky.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay.
Commonly called chemtrail survey.
When you were the head of NEMA, did you see the aerosol trails?
Mike Murphy, filmmaker in Los Angeles.
Hi, sir.
And we're covering an issue called geoengineering, and wanted to know if you're supportive of geoengineers' proposals. Congressman?
Hey, Congressman.
I'm wondering if you're supportive of geoengineers' proposals, which is dumping 10 to 20 million tons of aluminum into the atmosphere. Pardon? Okay.
Can you make an appointment to my office?
I'm not supportive of it. I haven't looked at it close, so I don't.
Have you heard of the issue? Because it's becoming mainstream in public, and there are actually congressional committees which are being formed to talk about these programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think when we drop anything into the atmosphere, we should know prior to the effect of that, right?
Yes.
And if we don't have the knowledge as to what the effect will be, we shouldn't do it.
I think there are 4 different options for thinking about deployment of geoengineering. The first one would be we just ban it.
I would argue that one does not want to get too firm a restriction in place on small-scale studies early on because it'll tie the science hands. I think what the science community ought to be trying to do is say, if you do small-scale stuff inside this space, and it's a scientific question what that space ought to be, there shouldn't be a lot of oversight and restriction.
Congressman? Excuse me. Hi, I'm Mike Murphy from Los Angeles, covering an issue called geoengineering. These guys are running from the geoengineering issue. I wonder why.
I'd have to talk to my staff. I don't know what the details on that are.
Have anyone made you aware of the issue, or? Sir?
Congressman, your committee talked about geoengineering last November. Are you in support of those proposals? I'd love to give you a paper.
Which?
Geoengineering? You know nothing about the geoengineering issue?
Never heard of it.
They call it geoengineering, but
Yeah, I never heard of it. It's nothing I've ever heard anything about.
when we looked up in the air today outside the DC, we saw this stuff going on. Quickly, have you heard of geoengineering? No. The proposal is to shoot 10 million tons of metals into the air. This committee, Science and Technology, covered it for the first time. No, I've never heard of it. So we were very concerned.
How you doing? I'm fine. So what?
We spoke with Congresswoman Watson's office, and her press secretary, Ms. White, was familiar with Representative Kucinich's Space Preservation Act, which mentioned chemtrails and the weaponization of the atmosphere in space, and then it was pressured to be taken off the bill. Did you see the aerosol spraying going on today over the Capitol?
Congressman?
Geoengineering carries with it a tremendous range of uncertainties, ethical and political concerns, and the potential for catastrophic environmental side effects.
He's not one to do interviews very often, so not unless we usually really pressure him into it.
Okay.
So don't, all that is, don't hold your breath.
As chairman of the Committee of Jurisdiction, I feel a responsibility to begin a public dialogue and develop a record on geoengineering.
We want to know if you're supportive of their measures by spraying 10 to 20 million tons of aluminum into the atmosphere?
No, I think we need to have more research.
Okay. And about the issue of current deployment, there's literally a mountain of evidence that many people believe proves the deployment of these programs. Any knowledge of that?
No, there's certainly not a mountain of evidence. But I do support research into geoengineering, and I also support looking into the international governance of that.
Okay.
I hope anybody that has studied it knows, at least I think, that it's a radical proposal, and I hope we don't have to use it, but there may come that point in time where we do.
Now, if we could provide you with the evidence that suggests that these programs are and have been ongoing, would you be willing to address this publicly?
We've had about 3 or 4 hearings on it. We have addressed it publicly.
Well, not about the proposals, but about the current deployment of these programs. Citizens.
I don't support the current deployment. I think we need to have more research, and they have consequences that go beyond one nation. And so I think that there needs to be governance to that.
Governance is not simply an issue of deployment, but governance before deployment in terms particularly of large-scale scientific fieldwork.
I concede that on this subject and in general, it's not popular to talk about global rules.
And when these people started talking about the need for UN Security Council oversight, a supranational environmental security enforcement with a strong mandate by the UN, it really was clear that they're looking for a global power behind the manipulation of the environment.
But I do think it needs to be sort of an international kind of treaty that does tie and bind all nations into a common fate. It is a common fate.
And unfortunately, it's not just big governments that could do this. It is small governments. It is billionaires probably could figure, I'm going to save the world all by myself, and I won't bother to mention it.
How do we decide when there's a planetary emergency? Whose hand is on the thermostat? How do we decide when to start it? There's no way to do that right now. And what if we do start doing it, and then by some problem with the technology or with the will, that we can no longer do it? In a year or two, the aerosols will come out of the atmosphere and temperatures will shoot up at a rate much faster than it's going up now. And it's that rate of change that's hard for us to adapt to. So once we start it, we'll be sort of locked into doing it for a long, long time. And so that, and with basically no end in sight.
Boeing would pursue this to make a profit, right? I mean, the financial motivation to do this.
Let's see. So let me not speak for Boeing.
Is that allowed? Okay.
Yeah, well, it is what it is.
No, but someday, if the U.S. is going to decide to do this stuff, they're going to look to a company who can do it, and you want to be positioned. Boeing would rather be get it than Lockheed Martin.
So certainly we have an industrial base that helps the country take on technologies and large-scale challenges like national defense. And we do that both for a profit motive as well as, I think, as a national service. So
I think it would be truly disastrous if, you know, we discovered a few years from now that there was a black program that some government had stood up to sort of learn on the quiet how to do this.
It's pretty clear you can cool the planet, but you will not and cannot bring it back to exactly the same climate state you started with. So you may or may not, and I expect we'll have a lot of back and forth about how useful it is to ameliorate the risks of climate change. I think there's a good evidence it probably is useful, but we don't know. But it certainly can't get you back to exactly the climate you started with. I think everybody agrees with that.
Do you think you'll see deployment in our lifetime?
Let me say I hope not.
Al?
I would agree. I hope not.
I hope
Very
not.
agreed. Okay.
I see this as something like an evacuation plan. You know, that you build big dikes. Maybe that's the emissions reduction to try to keep the flood from wiping you out. But that if that flood should come, that you'd like a plan for what to do in the event of that catastrophe. So I see these options more as a catastrophic response option and not as a way to reduce risk of everyday climate change.
You would advocate mitigating consumption of beef as a means of accomplishing your objective?
Yes.
How would you suggest going about that?
You can't. I mean, it's your job to decide what to tax and what not to tax. Obviously, if you wanted people to behave differently, you give them incentives and disincentives for behavior. But
I'm sure that's the answer you wanted to hear, Mr. Smith.
If only my time had not expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Because there's literally aluminum and barium contamination found around the world, believed to be from these programs.
Like, look, today over the Capitol looks like they're deploying some type of aerosol. Did you see it?
No, I didn't, but good to see you.
In a James Bond scenario, some rogue rich guy puts some airplanes in the air and seeds the clouds. What is to prevent that?
Okay, are you aware of the issue? You do it through the...
Are you in support of those proposals? What is your take?
I don't know anything about it.
You're not.
I have to get more information. I've got a chair here.
Okay, we'll give you a letter on this.
Yeah, this is a letter from constituents.
Okay, great.
Excellent. And many people believe that these programs have already been deployed because mass contamination has been found. Geoengineering programs, stratospheric.
Got it.
Yeah.
Just brought it up.
Spraying from airplanes.
Okay.
So what is happening? People from around the world are finding contamination.
Let me take care of this and I'll talk to you when I come back. I'll be back. He's here.
Thank you very much.
We see that even though we might make the average temperature of the planet about right, the rainfall patterns change some from today. And some places become warmer and some places become cooler. So there are going to be winners and losers in this geoengineering activity if we were to do it. But nevertheless, as David has said, there are reasons why we might consider doing it.
Many people are deeply concerned about it because of the toxicity of aluminum, and it has been addressed to Congress in various committees. Would you take a look at a letter from some of your constituents addressing the concerns?
Excuse me if I go.
Okay. Can I give you a letter from constituents? Are you aware of their proposals of dumping? Gotcha. Thanks.
Well, I'm not familiar with it, so I don't know what they're doing.
Okay. Well, geoengineers are proposing just that, dumping aluminum and barium into the atmosphere.
Why would they do that? Aluminum's a precious metal we can use.
Well, the stated goal is to actually cool the planet. However, there's a...
Sounds strange.
Right, exactly. So they're proposing dumping these metals into the air to block the sun, essentially. We're here just to find out what members of Congress are
I hope we would have a strong hearing on that before we decide to do.
I would hope so. And there's plenty of evidence that not only suggests that these programs have been deployed, because we're finding contamination of aluminum and barium on the rain, snow, and soil.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
LA County has seen a 200% increase of Alzheimer's over the last decade. Tons of ground and water samples showing high levels of aluminum all around our state.
Why don't you give me all the information you have I have some very good people I will assign it to. And if you get it to Mr. Lavelle, we will
He's
get
got
it
my
to
card
the
and
right-
send me an email and
Yeah.
we'll
Sounds
take a look
great.
at it.
We'll be in touch. We are
Okay.
investigating this, and there's literally a mountain of evidence that suggests that these
Okay,
programs are
move
going
that
on.
mountain over to us.
You
Let
got
us
it.
take a look at it.
And look up,
Thank
keep looking
you.
up into the sky and you'll see some of it.
Oh, okay.
You will. You can
All
see
right.
the aerosols being sprayed out of airplanes quite a bit.
Okay.
So thank you. Yeah, the future of humanity is definitely dependent on it. So we're counting on people like yourself to take some proactive steps. So thank you very much, guys.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Right.
A lot of Congress was running down the hallways to avoid answering any questions, looking for doors in the hallways. So apparently the war is against all of us, and we're all in a hostage crisis. People who took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution are not only know this is happening, are participating in this. And all of us have a duty to stand up and speak out about it. Why is the water being contaminated? Why is the soil being contaminated? Why are aluminum-related diseases going up? And it's affecting all of us, and thus we all have the duty to stand up and speak out and get educated and stop this. For our own sake, for our children's sake, it is a crucial moment in history right now. The human beings, we need to decide whether to live on our knees while being sprayed and poisoned every day, while being under a continual threat, or whether we are going to stand up and live as free human beings and seek truth, justice, peace, and freedom for all of God's children.
So as you can see, we're ending our film here in Washington, D.C. We've made many public officials aware of this. Most of them either denied any knowledge of this or they simply were unwilling to address the situation with us. So as you can see right behind the White House, we do have aerosols behind us. The spraying has continued. What is the solution? Is the solution here in Washington, D.C.? Clearly, this is one of the solutions, but the solution is not only here, the solution is within you. This issue affects all of us so deeply. So you need to look inside. Please get active, get involved, start spreading the word with growing awareness. About 90% of the population, we believe, is unaware of this issue, which means 90% of the people who normally might do something if they knew are not doing anything because they are unaware. So please look into your heart, use whatever skill you have to get the word out. The future of humanity is dependent upon it.
All right, I'll leave links in the description. Everyone leave your comments and opinions below. Take care. God bless.